When the Galactic Concord first discovered humanity, they saw us as nothing more than a primitive species, barely above the wildlife of their garden worlds. They noted our stubby claws, blunt teeth, fragile skin, and short lifespans. Our music and art were called crude noises, our languages dismissed as guttural barking. In their eyes, we were animals wearing tools, amusing and pitiful, not a civilization worthy of respect or inclusion. Yet they needed soldiers, expendable ones, to fight their endless border wars against the Ketheri raiders. The Concord drafted us in droves, promising rations and meager technology scraps in exchange for our lives. They shipped us to the mud-choked moons of the Valdaran front, a cold, sodden hell where acid rain scoured metal and soil alike. The Concord soldiers, elegant, aloof creatures with smooth shimmering armor, rarely left their floating command platforms. They ordered us to dig trenches, to crawl through sludge and wire, to hold lines they deemed beneath their own dignity. They called us the beasts in the mud, and even when we followed their orders flawlessly, they never watched closely enough to see what we really were. In the endless nights, when the Ketheri bombardments shook the ground and the sky glowed red with plasma storms, the humans did not tremble in silence like the Concord expected. Instead, they started to hum, first softly, a single voice here and there, then louder, until entire battalions joined in. They sang old folk tunes from Earth, field shanties, protest ballads, songs of home and heartbreak, of lost loves and promised tomorrows. The notes carried through the trenches, weaving through the smoke and rain like a defiant ghost. The Concord commanders at first thought it was madness, another sign of our supposed animal minds cracking under pressure. But the Ketheri heard it too, and for the first time in decades of conflict, they hesitated. The humans didn't stop. They sang when they charged across no man's land under hails of energy fire. They sang when they dragged wounded comrades back through the mud. They sang over the dead, burying them with voices instead of cold silence. Even when they fell, clutching wounds that should have ended them, they kept singing until their last breath rattled away. A Concord officer, curious or perhaps fearful, finally descended into the trenches one night to see it for himself. He expected feral howling, incoherent noise. What he found instead were humans, covered in soot and blood, arms linked as they swayed under the acid rain, their faces alight with something more powerful than any weapon he had ever seen. One old sergeant, his helmet cracked and one eye sealed shut with scar tissue, saw the alien watching. He raised his chin, spat a glob of blood into the mud, and beckoned the officer closer. "Come on," he rasped with a crooked grin. "Join in. It keeps the dark away." The officer stood frozen, overwhelmed. These so-called animals had woven strength out of despair, unity out of isolation, music out of the roar of artillery. The songs were raw, each note a declaration that they would not be erased or forgotten, even in death. Word spread. Concord soldiers, once certain of their superiority, began to lower their platforms, drifting closer to the trenches to listen. Some brought translation devices, slowly deciphering the lyrics about mothers waiting at kitchen tables, about starry nights over distant oceans, about a tiny blue planet far from this war. The effect rippled outward. Human units started pushing back the Ketheri, holding lines for days longer than predicted, advancing in places the Concord had already written off as lost. They fought like creatures who knew their time was short, but wanted every second to blaze as bright as a nova. They fought not just for survival but for each other, for the promise that someone would remember their voices. Eventually, even the Ketheri began to fear the singing. Their scouts would report hearing the low rise of human voices in the fog, and panic would spread through their ranks before a single shot was fired. At the final push on Valdaran's main ridge, the Concord watched in stunned silence as the humans emerged from the trenches, covered in mud and grime, faces split with toothy grins, roaring a battle hymn that turned into a swelling chorus. Plasma bolts tore the ground around them, but they didn't falter. They moved as one unstoppable tide, their song echoing off the blackened crags until the whole moon seemed to thrum with it. When the last stronghold fell, the humans did not raise flags or claim spoils. They gathered their dead, cradled each other, and sang them home beneath a sky finally free of artillery flashes. In that moment, something in the Concord broke open. They saw humanity not as animals, but as beings who could create warmth in the deepest cold, who could light the void with nothing but breath and spirit. They saw us, truly saw us, and understood too late that their measure of civilization had missed something vital. Humans were not beasts in the mud. We were not mindless. We were creatures of flame and melody, born to burn bright and fade, but never quietly. They thought we were just animals, until they heard us sing in the trenches, and by then, the whole galaxy could never unhear us again.